Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have Crisis Wing, a fun 90s arcade-inspired shoot 'em up. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Pie Slice Productions, Crisis Wing released for PC in mid-September 2020. So this one has the feel of those late 80s, early 90s arcade shooters, and it's one that I definitely recommend, especially if you're looking for a really competent, clean, but difficult shoot 'em up. Starting from the main menu, we have the 1-player and the 2-player game modes. There's a couple extra modes in addition to those. There's the practice mode, which lets you practice certain stages with infinite lives, and the time attack mode, where you're setting the highest score you can in 2.5 minutes. Today, we'll be looking at the game as a 2-player game. Starting your game, we have this cute little launch sequence, those kind of things I just love to get at the beginning of a shoot 'em up. So from a control standpoint, Crisis Wing is relatively basic. We have a shot, and of course we can move around the screen in a typical vertical scrolling shoot 'em up, and there's also a bomb. We'll be saving those till they're a little bit more relevant, but it is this neat exploding skull which deals quite a bit of damage to the screen, gives you temporary invulnerability. It's a wonderful smart bomb in that really useful system. So there are a couple other systems going on in the course of this game. So the enemies are kind of wave based, and oftentimes when you complete a wave, there'll be power-up ships waiting for you at the end of those waves, and those power-up ships will have 2 possible drops. One drop is the cycling weapon power-up, and that comes in 3 flavors. The green flavor, which is the power shot, the red flavor, which is the spread Vulcan, and the blue flavor, the missile pod. In addition, it is also possible to get additional bombs from those particular drops. Bombs like this. So this is our first mid-size enemy, and he goes down pretty quickly. So let's see, from this power-up, let's take the blue power-up and show off the missile pod. So there's also a really neat metal score system going on throughout the course of the stage. So the one I liken it most to is the bells from Twinbee. In Twinbee, if you selected the gold bells, they would be worth higher and higher point values as long as you never let those bells leave the screen. So in Crisis Wing, they're medals that certain enemies will drop, seemingly at random, and those medals start off at a point value of 100. As you continue to collect the medals will increase in point value all the way up to 1,000. However, or not 1,000, 10,000. However, if at any point you let the medals actually fall off the screen, then the point values will reset again to the default 1. So here we are at the first stage boss. So one thing to note, there is no boss health indicator, but as you deal damage to the boss, there's all these explosions and fires that start on them, giving you a good idea of how much damage you've done to the enemy boss. Once we clear the stage, there's no stage result, we just jump into the next stage, of which there are a total of 7 throughout the course of the game. Complete the game and it will go into a second loop with a higher difficulty, so something to aim for, and that can be quite satisfying. So there's one thing I haven't talked about in regards to the power-up system. So if you happen to collect the same power-up multiple times, so say I've picked up the blue power-up twice, you'll gain a P icon next to your score, as you can see there in the top left. If I happen to select another blue power-up, then that will power up both your primary weapon and your sub-weapon, so you would gain stronger missiles and a stronger primary shot. That P does not go away if you happen to lose lives, so it does persist between lives, something that's really neat. However, you do have to be careful, as that would involve collecting the same power-up twice in order to power up your weapon as well as your sub-weapon. So the game itself is rather high on the difficulty, especially if you're playing it single player, as the enemies can become overwhelming very quickly. One thing that the game does not do, your score multiplier for the medals is not reset if you lose lives, just as long as you don't happen to let any of those medals slide past. And that's basically the flavor of Crisis Wing. It's a really enjoyable shoot 'em up that becomes funner, I feel, if you're able to play it in a multiplayer setting. It feels like the game is balanced more towards that kind of gameplay than a more single-player experience like you would expect. It does have a couple control options as far as that's concerned. You can play with multiple controllers. You can have one player use the keyboard, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. And even as far as options are concerned, I felt that given how simple a shoot 'em up this is, it actually had some relatively robust video options and a couple gameplay options as well. There is no difficulty setting, no way to increase the number of lives, but if you are playing a multiplayer, you can choose to set the lives to a shared pool, or you can, another way you can change the difficulty is setting whether or not you're looking for the gameplay to use a checkpoint system or an instant revive system. Once you lose all your lives, if you set a high score, there is a name entry. And then the continuing does rely on a checkpoint system, but the checkpoints are fairly generous, so you won't be set too far back in most situations unless you die right before you've hit the new checkpoint. That can be a little bit disheartening, but it's definitely not the end of the world. So overall, this is definitely a title that if you're looking for a classic arcade feel with some decent difficulty, this is one that's worth giving a look at. Alright, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining me this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.